Good morning. It is now Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024, and this is Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is a special New Year's report. You notice I didn't do a Monday morning report. I did one on Christmas, and there was too much going on, and I thought it would be better to give a Monday breather for a change. Everybody was pretty busy, I'm sure, anyways, recovering from the night before. But I'm going to talk to you now about the year ahead. A lot of people like to have a year in review. There's a lot of people doing that. I think that the year ahead is going to be much more relevant, much more interesting. And I don't mean interesting in terms of intellectually interesting. I mean in terms of interesting times interesting. There are the makings of some serious crises coming that aren't really being touched on. Now, of course, there is Ukraine, which is petering out and will probably collapse. That war is effectively over. Then we have the situation in Israel and Gaza, and that could go bad in any direction at any time. When people start shooting at each other or calculating if they're going to shoot at each other, it can leave the door open to all sorts of bad stuff. But there's, again, too many people following that. What I am going to talk about is something that is not being talked about. Just before Christmas, it was announced that Finland, the newest NATO member, is going to have 15 military bases open to that Atlantic Alliance, the so-called Atlantic Alliance. For those of you who aren't really familiar with Finland or where it is, it's right up against Russia. And they've actually had wars over the years, including one in the last century. Now, with all the things going on and all the stresses, all the incompetence, all the saber rattling and saber usage, the West is now continuing to put itself at odds with Russia in a very threatening way. This could be a flashpoint, and I think it will be a flashpoint for something that could go off in a very, very bad way. Now, this whole mess, of which Ukraine is also a part, has been the result of decades of short-sighted incompetence on both sides, especially the side that won the Cold War, namely the United States and its allies. When you push any people, any nation, into a corner, and you threaten their survival or existence, or they think their survival or existence is being threatened, they have a tendency to jump at you with everything they have. And this is not being covered too much, that there's going to be 15 new military bases, potentially with nuclear weapons on them. That's possible, although I haven't read anything about that. So that's something to really look for. That could be what sets everything off. And people use the word World War III or the term World War III quite often these days. That could really do it. What is needed is sanity and common sense. If you look back at the leaders of the 20th century who had to deal with real crises, even going back to 1962 with John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, they would never have allowed things to go this far. And even with their best of intentions, they came close to duking it out with nukes. So I would watch this very, very carefully of what goes on. There's going to be also some talk about liquidating frozen assets that Russia has in the West. There's a lot of... It's not even tweaking the nose of the bear, it's kicking it in the face. And one has to just shake their head and hope for the best at this point. There does not seem to be any leadership in the West that would stand up to the craziness. And this has me worried. Now, other things to look for in the few months is more cyber attacks. Now, you keep hearing about cyber attacks taking down social media sites or leaking information from dating sites or something like that, which is relatively innocuous. But there's been some reports and there's been some experts in the field that are talking about the next stage of cyber attacks would be going after computer networks that are vital to human survival and growth and well-being. Things like hospital systems or something like traffic light systems or air traffic control systems, something where human life is being held in the balance and protected by computers. Now, there's been some science fiction done about that in the past, but in reality, this is now turning into something that's quite possible. If you, for example, in Northern Virginia, where I find myself, most of the heat is done not through gas, but it's done through electricity. So if there was a real cold spell, a polar vortex, and you shut off the electricity for a week or two, it's going to kill people. And that is how cyber warfare could be conducted and cause real-world casualties. That's just one example. There are many others. We had the cyber attack a while back of that pipeline that goes from Houston all the way up to New Jersey. And at one time, that was manned by men who would be manually controlling valves. And as I recall, the company had to pay ransom to get out of that system. It inconvenienced people quite a bit, including up here. You couldn't get gas for a couple of days in some places. But cyber attacks look like they're going to become much more deadly. And that is frightening. And that's something that people have to look for. Again, technology is not always the best solution to a human-focused situation. And that leads me to the next thing I want to talk about here to look for in the coming year, and that is, of course, AI, artificial intelligence. This is not going to go anywhere good, and I can't even fathom how anyone could think it could be a good thing. Yeah, people are making real nice memes on the internet that are rather over the top in some cases. They're using it to replace people. Graphic artists, I mean, there's great photographs out there that are being made with AI. There's songs being written with AI now. There's poetry. There's literature. I've gotten, in my regular day job, advertisements for how AI can make my business more profitable. I don't think it's going to go that way, folks, and I challenge anyone to come up with an argument that it will go into someplace different, someplace good. This is like a bad science fiction movie from my youth. Except there's not a lot of beautiful women being stolen by aliens. This is getting to be too much. I'm going to recommend 3 science fiction books for people to read. Now, they're pretty thick and they're pretty involved, and they're very good. Now, science fiction has also often been compared to a form of psychoanalysis of the human condition at a given time. And good science fiction is that. It's a form of philosophy. And I'm going to recommend 3 books. They are part of the Dune series. You know, the Dune movie where everyone's on this planet fighting over a semi-narcotic spice. Well, there's quite a few books in that series, and 3 excellent ones were written by Brian Herbert, who was the son of Frank Herbert, who wrote the original books, and a man named Kevin Anderson. The books are The Butlerian Jihad, The Machine Crusade, and The Battle of Corin. And this is about a future galactic war fought by humans to free themselves from thinking machines, artificial intelligence. These books came out in the early part of the 2000s. They're excellent. If you don't like reading novels, you're not going to be able to get through them. If you don't like reading, you're not going to be able to get through them. And that's the sad condition we can be in. But if you are into looking into what our future, I believe, is going to be if we continue on this path, I suggest you obtain those 3 books. and read them. They're available as audiobooks as well for those of you who are commuting. AI is going to be I predict it's going to be a major issue this year, especially as it puts more and more people out of work. One profession I remember reading about that's being replaced is that of a news director. Now, when I was a reporter back in the 90s, working in the major news agencies, I was always looking forward to about this time to be a news director at a small paper or a small broadcasting operation. Now they want to replace what was traditionally a job that took years and years and years of training to obtain with a computer. This is not going to go anywhere good, folks. So watch AI, and I would urge people to start fighting the good fight against this technological intrusion on the human condition. Okay, there's one more thing I want to touch on, and this will be something I'll be reporting on later. I've been mentioning over the last year the fate of an American YouTuber named Gonzalo Lira, a man who was a non-traditional journalist. And apparently he's been sentenced by a Ukrainian court to 13 years in prison, or more like 13 years in a gulag. The source of this was a website in Ukraine that supposedly listed the outcomes of various court actions, and he was listed there. I did see it. I don't read Ukrainian. It appeared to be authentic, but it hasn't been confirmed in conventional news sources or even among some of his followers. But you heard it here first. It sounds like it's believable. But even if it isn't true, the man is still being held. He's being held for reporting on the Russia-Ukrainian war and analyzing what he saw as the situation. Now, if this had happened during the Vietnam War, well, let's put it this way, it wouldn't have happened during the Vietnam War when American journalists were in Vietnam and reporting what they saw and analyzing what they thought the situation was. The thought of the South Vietnamese government arresting them and throwing them in prison for years wouldn't have occurred to anyone. Yeah, maybe kicking them out of the country, that was believable. But this is so unprecedented, and it shows how far the United States has lost prestige, and also how corrupt it's become if it's going to cooperate with such corrupt governments over the silencing and potential death of its citizens. Because Lira is probably not going to last 13 years in a gulag that he shouldn't be in the first place. I'm going to be reporting on this later and also giving some written instructions on my channel here to how to follow up with members of Congress, the Senate specifically. We can shake the tree on this, and I think we have to stand and fight in this particular case. A lot of people don't like the man. That doesn't matter. You can't do this to another human being for exercising his brain and speaking his mind. He wasn't calling for the deaths of anyone. He wasn't calling for any wrongful act. And as the old saying goes, you may not agree with what someone has to say, but you should be willing to defend to the death their right to say it. Well, that's it for today. And I do wish you a good new year, as good as it can be. But beware of what is to come, people. Beware of what is to come. And as I like to say, don't pray for peace. Pray for sanity and reason, because then peace will follow. If you like what you hear, and you like what you read, and you like what you see on my Substack channel, please consider a paid subscription. Also consider donations. They are welcome. It would free up my time to do more. And as this year progresses, there is going to be a lot to report, and I would much rather be spending my time doing that. That's all. Be good, be safe, take care, and good day.